Hey, this is the one-man gold mine, the one-man enterprise of professional wrestling and all entertainment, Flynn Hendricks. And you better believe when I'm looking for a good podcast to listen to, I go to my own. I go to the I Know You Hear Me podcast hosted by me, Flynn Hendricks. That is such a fresh perspective for how you should look at life, too. I love that. And then when I'm feeling spooky, I go to my other podcast, Tales from the Haunt, where I want my head shoved inside a 15-pound silicone mask. More. I want to have a bucket of sweat coming off me at the end of the night than just Jeff.
Dogs don't lay eggs, Flynn.
I hate you so much.
Talk to other scare actors about what it takes to get into the world of scare acting. So if you're curious about how people became professional wrestlers, actors, prioritized their mental health, became entrepreneurs, avoided burnout, or got into scare acting, you need to go check out I Know You Hear Me and Tales from the Haunt, available on all podcasting platforms. And I know you hear me.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I've got a very special guest here today, someone I've been really looking forward to talking to since setting this up. I grew up watching you on television, actually. So we got King Kaluha here. How's it going?
Really doing good, Rick. Appreciate you having me on board.
Absolutely. So really one of the things is I'm always interested in someone like how they got interested in the world of professional wrestling. So how'd you, I guess from what I heard that you had actually played hockey prior to joining professional wrestling.
Yes, I did. I actually was a football player in high school, and I played ice hockey I started playing ice hockey in high school, but we didn't have a high school team. Mm-hmm. And so strictly was a football player. When I went to college, they tried to recruit me to play, but I was already going there on a scholarship. So but I liked hockey, so I started playing ice hockey. I went to Villanova University and played hockey there on their club team, which is probably equivalent to like a Division II team as far as hockey was concerned. And so I've always been athletic, but I always liked wrestling too. But I was always drawn to the more entertainment aspects of it as opposed to the technical aspects of it, and so that's always been part of my background, is to really play up more the entertainment factor, but also be able to tie in the athleticism too.
Yep. Let's see. You started in, from what I hear, it was 1983, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. 1983.
For DC Drake's Continental Wrestling Alliance. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I started with it. There was actually a promotion before that.
Okay.
That I worked for. That was the guy who trained me, a guy by the name of Concrete Cowboy. He was the guy that trained me. And we had some Puerto Rican wrestlers from Philadelphia and from New York. They came down and worked out with us. But I worked in his organization first, and then he sort of teamed up with DC Drake when he started running his promotion, and so that was my first go around with wrestling with an area that ran repetitive shows. Then I eventually ended up in New York, doing a lot of stuff in New York. Some of the bootleg shows in New York City, which were very interesting. I got to go to places like Jersey City, and out in Long Island, I had a little run out there. So that was like the early part of my career for the first, let's say, 2 to 3 years.
You brought up New England, or Long Island, excuse me. I want to ask you about Mark Tendler was a promoter out there, correct?
Mark Tendler was a great guy.
Yes.
He had me on some really nice trips. Did a tour with him in Ecuador. Okay. And this was funny because it was a lot of Dominic DeNucci's guys. So Cactus was on it. I'm trying to think who else was on the Ecuador card. But there were Dominic's guys. And I got Tom Brandi, who was the guy who I trained, on the card too. And so these were some of the biggest houses we worked in front of. We worked in a bullfighting stadium with about 7,500 people, which was like, more than the 75 I might have been wrestling in with some bootleg in some indie show somewhere. Right. And we worked in that was in I forget where, I think that may have been in Quito, but there was 3 dates there. Also worked with. We went out to Rome with Mark Tendler. Wow. Alan Coage, a.k.a. Bad News Brown, and Antonio Inoki were on top. And the rest of it was a lot of Dominic's guys. And I actually ended up working with Tom Brandi on one card and Shane Douglas on the other. And those shows were around 13,000 people. Wow. So that was so Mark had some good things going on. But then after he got whacked, that was the end of that run. But worked a lot of stuff with him stateside too. He sent me and remember Larry Winters, another indie guy. Yep. He sent me and him down to the General Foods business conference at the Doral Country Club in Miami Beach, where we did a little angle there with at one of their meetings with Bob Backlund. So really interesting guy. Really had a good time with him. It's just a shame what happened to him, but he was a peach.
Every time I do research, say I'm getting New England guys or Northeast guys, etc. It's like his name always comes up. I mean, I listened to like say John Arezzi's radio show, and he was always a guest on there back in the day. And I actually had his grandson on here. He probably a couple of years ago. I believe that he's wrestling down wherever he is. I forgot where.
Really? No, I didn't realize he had a. I know he had a daughter. I think that was his only child. That was him and Kitty Adams.
Yeah, that's she just passed not so long ago. Probably like. I want to say about a year or two ago, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
See, I was familiar with his second wife more so than Kitty, although, of course, I was in dressing rooms or on shows, I think, where Kitty was at, I guess, before they broke up. But, Mark was always a character.
Yeah.
He must have had about a 60-inch chest, and he was always wearing sweaters. We think that was a wig he had. But he was funny. He was funny too. It was always cracked me up.
So one of the things that you went to pretty early on was also the NWF, the National Wrestling Federation. I believe it was DC Drake was heavily involved in that. And what's the guy's name? Raskin, right? Was it Bob Raskin?
Yeah, there was Bob Raskin and another guy named Mike Dano. Okay. Mike Dano was more, he had a history with booking, I think, musical acts and entertainment acts. I think Bob Raskin may have came originally from the roller derby. But he was also a promoter that I worked for actually even before Don Drake got involved with them. And so they sort of had, that was the NWF, which actually, that had almost not quite a territory, but almost a territory type feel. They had some TV, so that was a fairly decent promotion. They used a lot of guys that were off contract with WWF. So I got to work a lot of their main events with people like Sergeant Slaughter and folks like that.
I used to get the TV up here briefly, and then I had a bunch of VHS tapes, and I think it was on Sports Channel if I remember correctly. And I think one of the feuds was like Jules Strongbow and was it DC Drake maybe? Or was
Yeah,
it?
Jules feuded with Don. I had a lot of matches with Jules too, and there was sort of like a little bit of like emerging with like maybe the Samoans, but then the Samoans sort of rolled off and had their own group called TWWF. But those were separate from the NWF, but there was a lot of like going back and forth between people. Back in that era, there was still a lot of ability to go from one organization to the other. Not like it is today, where we have probably like 15 times as many wrestlers, and they sort of stick with the one group or the group that they've trained with. But back in the day, it wouldn't be unusual for me to be up in New England one week with one indie federation, and then be in, say, Virginia with another, and out in Western Pennsylvania with yet another. But guys nowadays, new guys, don't have that type of mobility for the most part.
Right. You mentioned the Samoans TWWF. I believe that was that run out of Hamden, Connecticut?
Yeah, that's where the Samoans I think lived at the time, and also where Jules was. So a lot of their things were up there. Then eventually, I think over time, they ended up, at least maybe some of them, moving to Allentown, where there was more shows coming out of that area.
Yeah. It's just funny because that I do remember reading about that TWWF like when I was a kid in some magazine based out of Hamden. I ended up living in Hamden, Connecticut for about 10 years. I just moved out of there probably in August. So I thought it was interesting that and I always heard, Strongbow lived there as well at one point. So yeah. I'm going to ask you about some matches. You wrestled in Southington, Connecticut, which is about 20 minutes from me, against Troy Orndorff, which was that Shane Douglas? That was Shane Douglas, correct, at the time? Or?
Yeah. So I wrestled him at a fair in West Virginia last summer, and we've seemed like to not see each other for like these periods of like 7 or 8 years, and so it's a big sort of reunion whenever I see him. And I still bust on him on that, saying that was my first match with him, and it was with Troy Orndorff. And so it's, but we have a little bit of a strange history. Like I said, we worked a match in Rome when he was Shane Douglas, but this was before he was the Shane Douglas from ECW.
Yeah, and
so. We had a real heck of a match because I guess we would have been like the semi-main there underneath Kovic and Inoki, and great match. Good guy.
I saw him at an indie. He was like a surprise opponent for, I don't know, a local guy here probably 2 years ago, and got to go, like the merch area and stuff like that. And he was very friendly and very talkative. Like there was people just talking to him the rest of the night. He was awesome to talk to, though.
Yeah. He's a really intelligent guy. He has an academic background, so
yes,
he could talk to you pretty much about any topic.
So one of the things is that did you work some Crockett's? I have a question from a friend. You worked 1 or 2 Crockett matches, correct?
Yeah, I actually it was a combined AWA NWA show.
That's the Pro Wrestling USA.
This was in Baltimore Civic Center.
Okay.
And so it was when they were doing this sort of collaborative these collaborative shows. And so I was doing TV for Vern out of Atlantic City, and Vern took a liking to me because in my matches, I'd always throw in some token amateur move, and Vern got to put it over on TV, especially if I worked with Greg. Right? So that was so he took a liking to me. So he had me booked on 2 shows at the Baltimore Civic Center. Now, the one funny story was I just gotten Tom Brandi trained and getting some shows, and so he took the ride with me down to the Baltimore Civic Center, and I was supposed to work with Marty Jannetty. Marty Jannetty and a couple of other guys got held up at one of the airports, and so I'm on first, and I was supposed to work with Marty, and I think Gary Juster, who was, I guess, one of the agents there, said, Marty's not here. The guy that came with you, can he wrestle? And I said, yeah, sure. But he didn't bring in his gear. So I had a spare pair of trunks. We gave him that. He borrowed Barrett Von Raschke's boots. And here's a guy who was probably wrestling no more than 6 months. And here he is, on a card with Dusty and Flair on top, Baltimore Civic Center, probably about maybe 10,000 people. And this is like his first 6 months into wrestling. So that was a pretty cool little situation for him. Had a good match too. They apparently they really liked it. He put in some time because we were waiting to see if everybody else was going to show up. Yeah, that was pretty cool. Pretty cool.
You got to do a lot of really good matches from doing research in the AWA from your time there. I got to see that you worked with the High Flyers, Greg Gagne, Jimmy Brunzell. You got to wrestle Slaughter. You got to wrestle Backlund. Was there ever a chance to go a little bit further with the AWA there?
Well, I was really pushing for that because it was funny. The first time I wrestled for them, Blackjack Lanza was one of the agents, and so he was going through all the guys that were the enhancement guys, of which I was one. And he said, "Oh, well, you're a baby face, right?" I said, No, I'm a heel. And because I was always a baby face before that, because a lot of the indie cards, you didn't have anybody who was like Hawaiian, Asian looking, and so that's generally was me. So first match it was against the High Flyers, and really worked my butt off hard. I think my second match was with Martel. Third match was Kurt Hennig. And so they all had good feedback to give back to Vern. And so I was like I like to refer to them, I was like their Johnny Rodz for that time. And so I thought that I was going to get some more work out of them. And after they started booking me down in Baltimore with these NWA shows, I thought, hey, okay, I'm going to get some work out of these folks. But soon after that is when they moved to Las Vegas, and then they ended operations. So I was hoping to get a little bit of a push there, but that sort of fell by the wayside. So, that was time to move on to something else.
I was listening to another podcast. I'm not sure if you're familiar, if you listen to any wrestling podcast, but the Stick to Wrestling podcast with John McAdam. He does like these certain weekly reviews of certain shows. So he was doing like an older WWF review, and pardon me if I don't remember every single detail, but were you involved in, as a fan, like a fan in the audience kind of a situation where you were brought out? I'm trying to remember the two wrestlers that were involved in the storyline, but
well, it was the Big John Studd Body Slam Challenge.
Right. Okay.
And so I was hanging out there trying to see if I can make some connections in the back, and the one ring announcer, Mel Phillips, said, "Hey, do you want to do this thing with John Studd?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so went in, tried to go for the slam. He was leaning on top of me, so I couldn't get him up. He's a big guy, and that was it. So a lot of people still remember that, and I think you could probably even find that out on YouTube somewhere. Yeah. But that was the first time I had any type of anything officially to do. That was the only time I've had anything to do with WWF or WWE. That was it.
I'm really surprised. I mean, because one of my next questions was, did you ever have the opportunity to go further or get up there or anything like that?
Well, no. Like I said, the AWA would have been like the biggest opportunity for me. But I've always had a real job, because I just know that the fickle nature of professional wrestling. And so, I didn't quit and leave and then go to Puerto Rico and then Tennessee and then to maybe Pacific Northwest, which would have been probably the route that I would have taken. And so the opportunity just never presented myself. And it's also that, the people that I knew weren't in those positions to be able to get me in. And a lot of that happens when you're trying to get a break into there. But then eventually, once I had a family, I had two kids, and they had some health issues, and going on the road really wasn't a possibility at that point. And so I was more than content just to keep on working independent.
Right. That makes sense, though. A lot of times people just don't want to be away from their families at all. So it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean the back in the territory days, I would say if I'd broken into a territory like, say, down south, that I probably would have taken a different route because I love wrestling. I love professional wrestling, and I just think that I wouldn't have mind going from like one territory to another, as long as I didn't have a family back home to worry about.
Right.
Because that's really hard on a family if you're gone for 3 months. Okay, now I have to go to this area for 3 months or 4 months or however long your run is. And to me, I think that's sort of what's hurting wrestling right now is the fact that there's not a turnover. It's same people all the time. And so you don't have these people coming in, coming out. And part of the excitement was, oh, who's new? Who's coming on new this week? Oh, okay. And then, all right, somebody else was going. They're on their way out. And so now you have some new talent. So someone else to take a look at. But now I think that's what sort of makes things a little stale right now.
Well, how much do you watch today, if at all?
Zero.
That makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. A lot of people I talk to doing interviews. I just spoke to Maniac Jimmy Dio last night. Mm-hmm. Actually, he interviewed him, and we were having this conversation. It's just like a lot of the product today. Some of it's unwatchable. At least the stuff on television, because it is the same people over and over. It's the same storylines over and over. There's no variety. Back when we were watching something like a territory or what have you, each week there'd be a bunch of matches, maybe one storyline going on, and that was what drew the people. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Now it's a TV show now, and before the TV was there to promote the house show, but now it's all about the pay-per-view, and the TV is setting up the pay-per-view. But I really never really cared for the little vignettes that they do. I just think they're silly. And the again, from when I grew up watching wrestling, you had matches, that was it, and then you had the interviews in the at halfway through.
Yeah,
and the interviews were great. The interviews were all shot pretty much off the cuff. There was no script.
Yeah,
it was just these guys were authentic, whereas the guys today are.
You can tell it's all scripted, because, well, for one thing, who uses words like this in an interview? They're all very well thought out and complicated sounding.
Yeah. I mean, I hear of guys, get to the arenas early at the WWE shows, and they're just reading off. They're trying to get their thing down, and I'm like, even now, I mean, I'll cut promos in the ring, and it's just all ad lib. And to me, that's the fun part of it. When it's so, if someone gives me a script to read, I'm like, I'm not going to read that. It's going to come from the heart. It's going to come from the head. So I'm more than happy just to be where I'm at right now and have more creative control than have to be forced into some type of character that I don't want to be.
Right. All right, so I'm going to ask you about Herb Abrams. Tell me about working with Herb.
I only did one show with Herb Abrams, just one show.
You teamed with Steve. Oh, no. I'm sorry. You teamed with the Wrecking Crew against Steve Ray and Tom Brandi, it looks like.
Maybe. I said it was one show. And so it was really unremarkable. I just remember, this was Herb Abrams, and he looked at me, and he sort of like, it was sort of almost like, well, how come I never heard of you before? How come you've never worked for me before? And he's probably high at the time. I don't know.
Yeah.
but I only worked with him once.
His story is a very interesting story. It's a little weird, but
Well, that's wrestling.
Yeah.
This is not corporate America, especially with the on the indie scene, especially back in the day. There's some really interesting characters. Like I said, he couldn't look any further than Mark Tendler. When he used to pay me, and my envelope said something about Garment District. So Garment District in New York, well, you're gonna have some interesting characters in that in that area, but nothing surprises me. Nothing surprises me.
I hear you. I want to ask you about working with the Savoldis. Obviously, you did a lot of time there.
Yeah, I did. I started off with them actually early on. I would say maybe this might have been like 84. And I went up and I was working as a baby face, and I got to work with some major talent up there. I worked with Dory Funk Jr.
Oh, really?
Lit his chest up, chopped up his chest, and he gave it right back to me. But he backstage, he said, "Hey, that's the way you got to be." I worked with the bushwhackers up there too, but they were called the sheep herders back then.
So it was early on, basically, prior to, I guess, 1989.
Yeah. That was early on, and so what happened was Tommy Savoldi, the ref, he used to ref AWA matches, and so he started talking to me and said, "Hey, kid, you want to come back up here and work with us?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I went up, and they pushed me as this Hawaiian, like sort of like a Ricky Steamboat babyface guy, where I was handing out lays, things like that. And then I stayed up there, and I brought Tom Brandi up there, and they liked him because he was the babyface's babyface, and women loved him. So we were a tag team. We became tag team champions, and then I turned on him and then went heel. So, but I fed a lot of guys up there. I put a lot of guys in contact with the Savoldis because they knew that I knew the guys down here, and so I would bring them up talent that either they would get, enhancement guys or guys that they actually ended up pushing. So that was great. That was the closest thing that I've been to in terms of a territory, because we would go up there maybe once a month or once every 2 months. And we'd have 3 or 4 shows. Plus, we would be doing TV. So that TV really got all around the country. It was really well syndicated. So we were on the regular UHF stations up there in the New England area. But in other parts of the country, we were on like your sports channels or whatever like those non-ESPN sports stations. And so we would like wrestle in Virginia, and people would say, "Yeah, we saw you the other night." And we said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, you're on TV down here." So that was a good run. They're a funny group too, but Mario, a great guy. I got a chance to see him on a show up in North Jersey. A guy who's running up there by the name of Tommy Fierro, and he brought Mario around. Yeah. And I hadn't seen Mario in literally maybe 25, 30 years. And so it was a great reunion with me, him, and Tom.
I used to travel up to Tommy's shows in the 1990s. Probably my first one was like 95, I think.
Okay.
The main event I remember was Terry Funk and Abdul the Butcher. So, but
Terry, okay, yeah. See, there was a spot there. There was times there like we would get fired up there, some for no reasons, or probably some reasons. We get fired, so I would be there, and then maybe gone for a while, and then come back, and then gone for a while. But yeah, he did bring in some pretty heavy duty talent, up there, and it was great to be able to work with them. Now, it was funny because he was also good at trying to build his own star. So people like me and Tom and Vic Steamboat and Eric Spracher, guys like that from New England, he tried to give a push to. Another kid by the name of Brian Walsh he was really good technical wrestler.
I just saw a brand new interview with him that just came out. You're familiar with Evan Ginsberg?
Yeah.
He I guess they just did a Facebook Live, and it was like a half hour of them just talking. Basically, it was brand new, and I was like, I thought that Walsh had really faded into obscurity. Kind of, I was like, really never hear anything about him, or he has no social media presence. But it was a brand new interview on his page.
Yeah, he was really good. Good build, great baby face. I've worked with him maybe once or twice. Really good guy. We had some other guys up there too. We had we had guys passing through like Ivan and Scott Putsky. They were we had funny stories with them. Johnny Canine, if you remember him. He had a little run up there, and he was a piece of work. Good guy, piece of work, but a lot of history with him.
Didn't he have issues with the law, if I remember correctly? Was that him?
Yeah, he had some issues with the law. He was involved in some type of activity. I just don't want to. It was interesting. We just heard that the one show he was supposed to, the one tour he was supposed to be on, he couldn't get across the border because of legal reasons. So that was that. But I actually wrestled on a show with him at the Ottawa Fair. This was an NWF show where I worked with Rick Rude in the main event up there, and Johnny was there. So good guy, though. I loved him. I had a good time partying with him.
I think, didn't he wrestle in World Class too? Was he the guy that wrestled, was it Taras Bulba, maybe? Or is that?
Yeah, he was Taras Bulba, I think. And that was Smoky Mountain, where I think he wrestled mostly.
Okay. I know he did a lot of time there, but I think that he also did, there was a World Class run under that name. I want to ask you, what are your memories of working with, obviously, like a New England legend, Tony Rumble?
Oh, Tony was good. Tony was good. He had a good mind for wrestling, too. He put together, he booked some good cards. He was probably a better promoter than he was a wrestler, I think. But he was a brawler type. But Tony was Tony had a good wrestling mind. And it was a shame he passed on because he really wasn't that old. I mean, he was probably the same age as I was. And when he took over the booking responsibilities for ICW, he really did a good job with it.
And he separated and ended up forming the CWA, Century Wrestling Alliance. Was there a falling out between him and the Savoldis before he left that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, but I was gone by then.
Okay.
Because I lived through a couple of different bookers going through the ICW. We had a guy I forget his name. He's an old timer from Canada. I forget his name, Belay or something.
Okay.
Then it was Jonathan Boyd was booking up there. That's probably when I had the hottest. The angle with me and Brandi, with me turning on Brandi, was a hot angle. We had some really good matches up there. There was a lot of heat. And then Paul Lee ended up booking up there too.
Yep.
Right. So, and then I think after he left is when Tony took over. But that whole line was kind of interesting.
I think Paul Lee didn't last very long. Maybe just it seemed. I mean, I heard mixed stories. It was like a few days, a few months, whatever. Before I guess they got frustrated with his style or something like that. to that effect?
I said there was drama behind the scenes with ICW on some of it, but I didn't want to. It's like, hey, whatever.
Yeah.
As long as I'm getting booked, I didn't care who was booking. As long as they use me, I'm okay. So I didn't hear too much of the backstory behind all that stuff. But that's wrestling.
Speaking of Paulie, you were in some of the earliest days of ECW when it was NWA Eastern Championship Wrestling. A lot of the footage you could find on, I guess, Peacock, some of it on the earliest TV. I remember you there. You wrestled, staples like what's his name? Sorry, Larry Winters. We just mentioned his name. And I saw that you took on the Sandman, the surfer gimmick, Sandman at one point. If you remember this.
Yeah, you know what? I don't remember if I wrestled him. I know I tagged with him once, but I don't know if it was for them. It may have been. I think it was for a different promotion, but I don't know if I remember wrestling him. I know I wrestled Morocco for them. I wrestled Snuka for them, and then a couple of the house shows, but some guys that didn't. I don't think they stayed around. For when Gilbert came in, because I was out before I was out as Gilbert came in, and then when Paulie was there, I wasn't there at all. So I was there at the beginning stages of ECW, but not for the hardcore part. I probably wouldn't have stuck around for that. That's not my style, and my I don't know how my style would have went over there with the Philly people. So
I mean, what they should have done is they should have really had like more of a variety show where it was just everything was just tables, ladders, chairs, flames, all that stuff. What I mean? Like,
yeah, well, that's what there are shows like that are out here now, and it's like a lot of promotions want to have that one hardcore match and. For I don't know what for. I know there's a crowd for that.
Yeah.
But to mix it up with a family show doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Well, that's the thing. You said you watch 0% of wrestling, but there's like certain gimmicks on TV. Like I bring my 7-year-old son with me to shows practically every show. I don't want him to see certain things. You know what I mean? Because I feel like wrestling, it's always been a family show.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I wasn't a fan of the whole Attitude Era. So I always just want to, like, there's certain things that happen in the modern NWA when I go to watch it. I actually have to change a channel because he's 7 and I don't want him to see this stuff.
Well, yeah, that's the one thing that I was brought up with. Like, you're not, I'm not going to give anybody the finger. I might give him the old Italian salute like that, but that's not too offensive. But not some of the stuff like when you're just cursing and stuff like that. That's just to me, it doesn't take anything to do that. I want to get my fan reaction from something that I do that's not that's not going to be considered vulgar, right? This guy is a jerk, right? Because I'm uber heel. Right, this guy's a jerk. He's condescending, but he's not. I'm not going to spit on anybody. I'm not going to do anything that's going to offend anybody in the audience. I'm not going to say anything that's going to offend anybody in the audience. There's a fine line. But you don't want to cross it,
right?
And you don't want to consistently cross it, and you don't want every match to cross it. So. I can understand that because I have children too, so I don't want them to necessarily see some of the stuff that goes on. And again, some of the ultra violent stuff where people are with barbed wire or,
light
broken
tubes.
Glass, stuff like that. There's an audience for that. And okay, but just not my cup of tea. Put it that way.
I'm not that audience. So, yeah. Let me ask you, working with Vic Steamboat over the years.
So I got to work with him just with the ICW, and that was a good program. That was a good program. Hit him over the hip to pineapple, smushed it in his face. So that was good. But it was good. It was good chemistry between us, I thought, because you had the good Hawaiian and the bad Hawaiian.
Right.
You had the pretty boy and the more of the brawler type, and that was me. So it was good. I enjoyed working with him. He's smooth. He was smooth. You would he would definitely be a top baby face in any of the indies that you would go to.
I always thought he was a really great wrestler, and it was, I enjoyed watching him, in ICW or IWCCW, whichever it was. And I only had a couple of chances to see him. Maybe he made some appearances in WWF and WCW, basically just to do jobs.
Yeah, and it's a shame because you figure with the name and he had the great look.
Yeah.
But it's it depends who you know, and who's going to go to bat for you, and who do you fit in, or they what they're looking for, and it's a shame. He didn't have a real long span in the business. I mean, I'm probably like 40 years in now.
Yeah.
So for me, there's if you're in the business for just little periods, to me it's okay. Yeah, he was here for a cup of coffee and he was gone.
Yeah. I mean, I find it odd. Sometimes you hear people having only like a 10-year career, and I'm like, that's it, or 15 years, because then I know guys such as yourself that've been doing it for 40 years and such. So it's kind of funny.
Well, I mean, that's to me. That's what I'm really enjoying it now, maybe more so than even when I was younger, because I do have this history, and there's guys that come into the locker room and I think I know that guy. And yeah, he wrestled for a span of like 10 or 15 years, but that's a quarter, 10 years is about a quarter of my whole experience in this world. So it's I'm thinking hey, well, when's time up? But right now it's not up yet. So no. I'm still going. Yeah. Last year was one of my busiest years since the heyday back in the 90s and the 80s.
That's amazing. Where are you living now? Where are you working? You're just working in your local area? Are you traveling at all?
No, I go to West Virginia. I go to Central Pennsylvania, North Jersey. I go to South Jersey. Every now and then I'll go down to the Carolinas. Every now and then I'll go up to New York. I'm based out in the Philadelphia area, but I work for a lot of, like, again, as I was mentioning earlier, I have the opportunity to work for a lot of different independents, not just one.
Right.
So and I think a lot of promoters or bookers who really really are professional, they like to use someone like me because it's good for the younger guys to see how an older professional works.
Right.
And that's my role at this point, is sort of to pass that along. And it's funny because I have young guys saying, "Oh, sir, I'm going to work with you. I'm next in line." And so I'm like, "Hey, as long as the booker puts us together, you're going to have a good learning experience." And that's my role at this point.
Right.
I'm sort of like a novelty because when I come out, I look like an 80s wrestler.
Right.
And so a lot of the older people in the audience sort of like, you could see that they're sort of identifying with me a little bit. Some of the younger kids are like looking at me like, he's not like the rest of these guys here. He looks older, like my dad's age, but he's still big and he's mean. So that's what I bring to the table now.
Do you still come up for Tommy Fierro at all?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I thought I saw a picture in the last year or so. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. No, I haven't worked on a card recently, this year, but last year I was working for him a lot. So, and that's okay because I don't want to overstay in an area too much. Okay, make my appearance, and then maybe there's certain areas I'll stay in a little bit longer, but you need like even just like I was saying before, you need that rotation.
Right.
You can't go to the same Indy card and see the same guys all the time. So I don't get my feelings don't get hurt if I don't get booked every show that you're on.
Right.
You
And that guy has got a lot of stuff, working on a lot of projects right now, Tommy.
Yeah, he does. He hustles. He got his store,
Yep.
and he did some work with an off-Broadway sort of wrestling story tied to a musical.
Yeah.
So he's a hustler. He works hard, and he puts together he has a real professional presentation.
Yeah, he's been, like I said, he's been busy. I want to go up to that store. It's like only a couple hours away. See there. I collect old programs and magazines and such. So,
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen him post stuff. I have bought stuff from him online, but he's got anything that he posts, like massive amounts of stuff. So, any magazines from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's the stuff that I that I enjoy looking at. This when I see things pop up on Facebook, and yesterday I was watching a match with Bulldog Brower and Baron Mikel Cicluna, and then Johnny Rodz and Davey O'Hannon.
Wow.
I mean, and there were other matches on the card. Those guys were like on the underneath part of the card, but they're the ones that I enjoy watching.
Yeah.
Especially with the old WWF house shows. Davey is a guy that I always liked. Johnny, of course, a guy that I always liked. Unfortunately, the only time I get to see them anymore are at funerals. That's
a shame to think about. Johnny's still training, and I'm about to have one of his students as a guest on here next month, so I'm really looking forward to that.
So I was up in New York, maybe it was before COVID, and I was in the financial district, and I said, I'm going to go over to Gleason's and just pop in and see who's there. Gleason's gym. That's where that's where Johnny's school is. So took the subway over, walked over, and walked into Gleason's. And Johnny's looking at me like, is that you? And so we got together. I figured I was going to watch the guys work out. He took me in the back in his office, and we just sat around and talked for like 3 hours. He was showing me some of his early stuff, his early paychecks that he got from Vince. And it was really interesting to sit back there and talk with him because the guy has history, and again, one of the best.
Have you seen his one of his students, PJ Savage, at all?
The name's familiar, but I couldn't say if I was on a show with him or not.
I highly recommend checking this guy out. Like I said, next month he's coming on here. It's gonna be his second time on.
Mm-hmm.
Dude's a beast. He's freaking. I think this kid's great. So I really like him a lot. He worked a bunch down here in Connecticut, and we just kind of got to know each other a little bit. So he's now he's getting really out there, like all over New England and the Northeast. So
is he a big kid or?
He's kind of thick, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's not like particularly tall, but he's definitely kind of thick a little bit, and he works like I don't want to say like a Samoans like type style, but something similar to that in a way.
Well, you don't have to be big to be a big guy nowadays.
Yeah.
I tell people that back in the day I would consider myself average, but nowadays on the indie circuit I'm actually like big.
Well, that's the thing. That's what happened since I guess earlier 2000s with groups like Ring of Honor and stuff like that. They promoted the smaller guys and not necessarily the big guys, you know what I mean? So that became like the popular thing, and a lot of those maneuvers that the smaller guys do.
Yeah, and quite frankly, a lot of big guys just can't do those same moves. They can't move at that same speed. But it's kind of funny that by lasting this long, all of a sudden now, I'm one of the bigger guys on the card. I've always one time we were wrestling. This was actually even back in the '90s. We had some guys that they were new guys, and this was a Bob Raskin show. I want to say it may have been like Asbury Park area, someplace in North Jersey. And then me and Tom came out, Randy, and I heard somebody in the audience say, "Oh, the real wrestlers are here now." So it was like, "Oh, okay, that's I guess that's a compliment." But so that's one of the things that is missing. There's guys here that spend like more time in the ring than they do in the gym,
right?
And really, it's the look that is just as important as how good you are in the ring. Sometimes even more.
Right.
Back in the early WWF, a lot of the guys, they just got over with their size.
Yeah.
And again, watching these old house shows, there was no bunch of high spots jumping around. It was like punch, kick, hold, and it got over. People loved it.
I sit there right now. I'm currently watching the 1980 Championship Wrestling, WWF Championship Wrestling. A lot of it's centered around the Bruno and Zbyszko feud.
Oh,
and Johnny Rodz is featured quite a bit on there. So it's just sit there and watch that, and there's just a lot of pure wrestling. There's a lot of big dudes that are just, like you said, purely over. Hogan, I think, is he in there for his first run, maybe? It's called the Incredible Hulk Hogan, or
yeah.
The guy's massive. You know what I mean? As compared to some of the guys they put him up against, it's yeah, man, it's incredible.
It was always the Puerto Rican guys from North Jersey that they would be cannon fodder. But that's the way it was. But then I would see some of those same guys on some of the indie shows when I would be working up in Newark or Bayonne, and it was sort of like, okay, well, that was the world of professional wrestling. It was, like I said, it's just been a long, strange trip.
Yeah, I get you. It's funny because a lot of times I would see guys on say WWF TV or WCW TV doing jobs, and they'd go to I'd watch, for instance, the Savoldis, but any other indie smaller indie that was on television, but they would just be like they'd come out as like basically stars, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
On there, which I always just like, as a kid, I was always confused by it. I was like, how's this guy? The first time I ever saw Iron Mike Sharp or Tony Ulysses win a match was for the Savoldis. I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah. But then sometimes you'd see these guys. Oh, these guys are pretty good.
Yes.
He got killed when I saw him on TV, but when I wrestled him, he was pretty good. I guess he must have had a bad day when he was on TV.
All right, Mike. Is there anything you'd like to throw out there? I think I brought up everything that I had as far as my notes go here. So is there anything else you want to throw out?
No, not really. I think we covered a whole from beginning to end there. So there's there's so many funny stories that I have. Maybe you save that for a different time. Of course, some of those might not be. They more R-rated stories, but
this is an open show where this is not censored.
Well, they can book me again for some of those. We've had half of the fun of being involved in this is just the stories that you get, and it's sort of like now. Again, the last two guys standing really are me and Tom Brandi. We're as far as the indie guys in the that are still actually active, that will do it more than just 3 times a year. And so, but we're not ready to go yet, and we still get new stories. But we'll sit in a car. We'll take a 4-hour drive down to West Virginia because he lives near me, and we'll just sit and talk about, hey, do you remember this? Do you remember this? And that's the wealth that I've gotten out of professional wrestling. I can't retire on it, but I have plenty of stories.
That's the thing. I forgot to mention this. He, speaking of Brandi, like he still does some work with Gino Caruso's ECPW. He was just here in Connecticut over the summer, so 16 months ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really good friends with Gino too.
Yeah.
Last time I worked for Gino was actually with Tatanka,
Okay.
down in Jersey, and well, we had a heck of a match. I mean, it was like, these are two older guys, but we were going at it.
He could still go.
Oh yeah, he's definitely one of the older legend types that still could work really hard. And Gino's a really good friend too. We always have a lot of laughs too.
Yeah. He's a guy I first met in 1995 because of Tommy Fierro at when he was running those conventions, and seeing him on ICW or IWCCW TV. I was just like, this is awesome. This guy, I just saw this guy on TV this weekend. Here he is. And of course, I was still somewhat of a kid at the time, but it was great to meet Gino, because he was very friendly. We sat there talking about just wrestling. That's it. I got to learn about him then.
Gino has a school and a really successful promotion. He runs quite a few shows over the year.
Yeah.
So he's been really successful as a promoter and also as a trainer. So, but another good guy too. We got to go to Venezuela with the Savoldis, and
nice.
We were we probably got over bigger than the stars that were down there for some reason.
Wow.
One reason or another. People really took to us because I guess we worked with them more than anybody else.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. Do you want to point out your social media?
Well, not really. I mean, the only thing I have is just my Facebook account under Michael Kaluha. I'm almost at 5,000. But if anybody does want to hook up, especially if they want to book me, then certainly they can. I don't do anything else other than just Facebook. Maybe eventually I'll probably branch out a little bit more. I don't do Twitter, if you hurry up, you can get in before that I hit that 5,000 mark, because I'm right at 49.63, I think.
Oh, you still got time. So
yeah.
All right, thank you, Mike.
All right, glad to be here, and hopefully we can do this again.